Well, hello kinesiology students, it's Mr. Cranny here, and today we're going to talk a little bit about growth and development. And we're going to talk about two key developments or sequences of development that occur in infants, toddlers, to children, and these two concepts are two big words. One is cephalocaudal and one is proximodistal. The cephalocaudal sequence means that development occurs from superior to inferior. Literally, it means head to tail. So when we say cephalocaudal sequence, we mean that growth in an infant will start in the head and then proceed lower down in the body, more inferior in the body. And we know that brain development is very key in infants, and as children grow, they have a more developed core and then more developed extremities as they go through their stages of growth. And that ends up looking a lot like this, very rudimentary drawing, where we have young babies with very large heads. Sometimes you can say that they have this alien-like bodies because they have very large heads with teeny tiny little bodies. And those large heads create difficulty for infants to be able to do things like get up and walk. You often see infants starting off very low to the ground. All infants start with this head to the ground, and the idea that they can get up and first sit up or crawl takes a little while because their head is very large and the rest of their body hasn't caught up with the development of their head. As children grow, though, the size of their head relative to their body tends to shrink a little bit, so they have slightly larger, more developed bodies, and their head size is a little bit smaller relative to the rest of their body. Still fairly large. So when a toddler is learning to walk, etc., they have a larger head proportionally than an adult will, and that will cause some stability issues as they go. And then as children grow and develop later on into adults, then the size of their head kind of catches up with the development of their body. And a full adult body has much larger, their head size does not take up nearly as much as their body mass. That plays a role in some of the motor skills that are developed in children over time. One thing is, we just talked about the idea of crawling before you're walking. So if you have a very large head, a very large mass of a head compared to the rest of the strength of your body, you're going to keep it fairly low to the ground, you don't have the strength to be able to lift it up and certainly not get it up to this walking position. So it takes a little bit of development of the rest of the body for a child to be able to go from that down on the ground position up to like a sitting up position, pulling themselves up to standing, and then getting to walking. And I'll jump down here to instability too. So when a toddler is actually walking, it's a little bit like Frankenstein, kind of, because their head is so massive that we know that when there's a larger mass away higher up, there's a center of gravity there that's much higher as well. And so the higher center of gravity makes them very unstable. So the younger children are learning to walk, and then they're learning to run. There's a lot of instability there, a lot of falling that occurs just because of their development, head to tail. Jumping is very difficult as well because of this. Again, the mass of the head compared to the development of the rest of their body makes it really hard to overcome. You need a lot of strength to push that massive head up. So it doesn't look much like a jump. Like, they don't get off the ground as toddlers and as young children. Jumping is pretty hard to do. Got to overcome a lot of force. And then just weaker extremities. So being able to do these gross motor skills or fine motor skills, you just don't have the development. It's kind of goes down from the head down to the core, and then kind of out to the extremities. So you have very limited motor skills because of that development sequence. The other development sequence we're going to talk about is the proximodistal sequence. And this is, near to far, but we understand, proximal right down the kind of closer to the middle of the body, and then distal further away from the middle of the body. So we know those two terms, and really development occurs in children from the core, more from the middle or more to the point of attachment of a limb, more to a distal, further away from the point of attachment of the limb as well. So it's that core idea. It's that idea of not just head to tail, but this core, this middle and outward development of motor skills. We see this really demonstrated well with catching. So the catching skill, if you watch a beginning catcher, a young toddler learning to catch, what you'll notice is that they're going to trap the ball close to their body. They're gonna the ball will come and they'll want it to hit like their chest, and they'll kind of trap it with their arms. And that's that idea of it's got to be right in the middle of their body, and they've developed those muscles first that are really close to their body, and they're able to catch it in sequence. Get that motor program running appropriately in their brain to be able to sequence those muscles to be able to catch. As they progress, the next stage would be kind of catching with two hands, perhaps, but close to the middle of their body, right? So they're going to catch with two hands, but don't you ever dare throw it, to their left or right, because that's really going to be over their heads. It's got to be more closer to the middle. So they're getting a little further away from their body by catching with their hands, right? They're out here a little bit more, not trapping it to their chest, but you're still not going to get a lot of distance away from the body to be able to catch. And then progressing still, as you learn more, you get further and further away. Well, eventually, of course, we know we can reach out and catch with maybe one hand even, and that would be the furthest, most distal development there of catching. So it's this stage, it's this transition from step to step. And we know if we're teaching a young person to catch, we're going to aim it right at their body, and then we'll try to challenge them maybe by moving a little bit left or right, or we'll teach them to catch with their hands, and then eventually they're going to get out further from their body. This has other implications as well. Things like lateral movement. So kids are very good at running like in a straight line, but you think about if I'm going to make a cut, if I'm going to put my foot out, in one direction, or if I'm going to shuffle sideways, that's a more distal type of movement. And it's just more different muscles that they're using that are maybe a little bit further away from their core. So that's a more difficult skill that's going to be developing later on, is just that, side to side lateral movement that changes. Striking and throwing, we see this a lot. So if I'm playing badminton with a developing child, then I'm not going to use the full length racket, because that's a long ways. That's even further away than my hand in terms of striking. It's a long ways from my core. It's a very distal type of movement. What you're going to do if you want a striking skills, you're going to get a shorter racket that's as fairly close to the hand as you can possibly get. So it's a little bit of an easier skill. And then as they progress, you can get a longer and longer racket to be able to make contact with the bird. Same idea with, like baseball. You're going to have them either choke up on the bat or a much shorter bat and allow them to strike a ball much closer to the midline of their body. Same idea with throwing. If you watch an early thrower, it's going to come like this. Or like this if you have them throw it further, and then you have to teach them kind of to get this one hand kind of movement, and then further away and to a complete throw with a complete range of motion. So we see that progression, and we got to teach a little bit of that progression as well. And then something like a basketball shot, right? If you're getting into a very specific skill, we often see young people like pushing it from here and not really using much of their hand. And we know that a good basketball shot will involve the fingers as well. And when you finish, it's that fingertip sequence that helps a lot, and you don't see a lot of young people developing their fingers into their shot until later as they progress in their skills. So cephalocaudal and proximal distal sequences development has a big role to play in the way that students develop their skills.